You lie down, close your eyes, and expect total darkness. Instead, you get swirling colors, tiny sparks, maybe a reddish glow, or strange shapes drifting across your vision. Sometimes it's an after image from your lamp, sometimes it's little stars after rubbing your eyes, sometimes it's weird patterns right before you drift off. So what's actually going on back there? If there's no light coming in, why isn't it just black? Your eyes and brain aren't fully shutting off just because your eyelids are down, and what you're seeing is actually your visual system's own private light show. Here's why your eyes see colors after you close them. Most of us grow up assuming closed eyelids are basically an off switch. Lights out, curtains drawn, show over. So when color and movement show up instead of blank stillness, it can feel unsettling, like your brain refuses to power down for the night. But here's the real puzzle. There's no image hitting your retina, no photons entering the eye. And yet something is clearly being seen. That gap between zero light and a visible show is where the mystery lives. Your eyes are closed, but your visual system is still very much awake and working. What's actually producing that private display has nothing to do with malfunction, and everything to do with how your eyes and brain behave the moment real input disappears. Here's the first piece of the puzzle. Your retina, the light-sensitive layer at the back of your eye, isn't a simple on-off switch. It's made of millions of photoreceptor cells that generate tiny electrical signals whenever they're stimulated. And here's the thing, those cells don't need a clean, focused image to fire. They just need some kind of trigger. Even with your eyelids shut and no real picture coming in, these cells keep producing a small trickle of electrical activity on their own. Think of it like a microphone that's technically turned off but still picking up faint static in the room. That static is the very first ingredient in your closed eye light show, and it's happening whether you're aware of it or not. Now, one of the fastest, most obvious versions of this shows up when you've been staring at something bright. Picture looking at a sunlit window or a lamp for a few seconds, then closing your eyes. You'll often see a ghostly colored shape hovering in your vision, sometimes in the same colors, sometimes in strange inverted ones. That's not your imagination. The photoreceptor cells that were just hammered with light keep firing for a little while after the stimulus is gone, like a struck bell still humming after you stop hitting it. Your brain interprets that lingering signal as if it were still real, live information, even though the actual light source is long gone. That's the after image, and it's proof that your retina doesn't have an instant off switch, it has a fade out. But after images aren't the only way your retina can fire without real light involved. There's a second, completely different trigger, and it has nothing to do with brightness at all. It's pressure. Rub your eyes after a long day, and you'll often see quick bursts of sparks, or little dancing stars. Press gently on your closed eyelids, and you can sometimes summon soft bursts of light or color on command. This happens because the photoreceptor cells in your retina don't actually care what caused their activation. Light, pressure, mechanical friction, it's mostly the same to them. Any physical disturbance can nudge these cells into firing, and once they fire, your brain treats that signal exactly like it would treat real light. It has no way of knowing the difference. So your brain, doing its usual job of interpreting signals from the eye, reads that pressure as a flash, a spark, a fleeting shape. This is one reason your eyes seem to have a life of their own, even in total silence and stillness. So far, everything we've covered comes from inside the eye itself, but there's a second, completely separate source of color, and it lives just outside the retina, in the eyelids themselves. Your eyelids are thin, thinner than most people realize, and running through them is a dense little network of blood vessels. When bright light hits your closed eyelids, say you're lying outside with your eyes shut, facing the sun, that light doesn't just bounce off. Some of it actually passes through the thin skin and gets filtered by the blood moving through those vessels. Blood absorbs certain wavelengths of light and lets others through, and what gets through skews toward warm, reddish tones. That's why, if you've ever closed your eyes in strong sunlight, you've probably noticed an orange or reddish glow washing over your vision. That glow isn't coming from inside your eye at all. It's coming from blood flow, quite literally your own circulation, acting like a colored filter over a light source. Now here's where things get more interesting, because so far we've explained sparks, after images, and a reddish glow. None of that fully explains ongoing color, movement, or complex swirling patterns that seem to have no obvious trigger at all. For that, we have to look past the eye entirely and into the brain, specifically the visual cortex, the part responsible for actually constructing everything you consciously see. Your visual cortex was never built to sit idle. Under normal daytime conditions, it's constantly receiving a non-stop stream of information from your eyes and constructing your visual world out of it, moment to moment, without pause. It's less like a screen waiting for a signal, and more like an incredibly busy editing room that is always running, always producing something. So when you close your eyes and cut off most of the real structured visual input, the visual cortex doesn't just power down and go quiet. It keeps running its normal process, but now it has far less real information to work with. Instead, it starts amplifying and interpreting the faint background noise still coming from those slightly active photoreceptors and blood vessel signals. Random, low-level electrical firing gets treated the same way meaningful visual data would be treated, and your brain, always trying to make sense of incoming signals, starts constructing something out of that noise: shapes, movement, drifting specks that seem to float across your field of vision, sometimes called floaters. Occasionally jagged zigzag lines that seem to shimmer at the edges of your vision. This is your visual cortex doing exactly what it's designed to do, interpreting signals, except now, those signals are essentially static rather than a real picture. This noise-filling process becomes even more vivid the closer you get to actually falling asleep. As your brain shifts out of full alert wakefulness, the visual cortex's interpretations become looser, more dreamlike, and less tied to anything resembling a stable pattern. This is often when people notice swirling colors intensifying, or briefly glimpsing shapes that almost resemble faces or scenes, right at the edge of sleep. It's the same noise-filling mechanism, just operating under looser rules as your nervous system continues winding down toward unconsciousness. So put all three pieces together, and the mystery stops being strange. The retina firing quietly on its own, the blood vessels in your eyelids tinting things reddish, and your visual cortex filling the silence with its own noise. None of that is your nervous system glitching. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it's built to do when the lights go out and the day's real information stops flowing in. This isn't a malfunction. It's more like watching the gears of your visual system slow down and idle before shutting off completely. But here's something worth noticing. That show isn't always the same intensity. Some nights it's a faint drift of color. Other nights it feels louder, busier, almost distracting. And the difference usually traces back to one simple variable: how much leftover light stimulation your retina was carrying the moment you closed your eyes. Remember the afterimage from staring at a bright lamp. The brighter the light, the stronger and longer that afterimage lingers. Your visual cortex has more leftover signal to work with, so it produces a more vivid, more chaotic pattern once the real image fades. Less bright light beforehand simply means less raw material for your brain to turn into a light show. This gives you an actual lever, not a guarantee, just a lever. If your retina isn't loaded up with intense light exposure right before bed, there's simply less residual firing for your visual cortex to amplify into something jarring. The system calms down because you've quietly lowered the volume on its main ingredient. So here's the simple version. About 20 to 30 minutes before you actually lie down, start dimming your main lights. Swap the overhead lights for something softer, a lamp in the corner, a dimmer switch turned low, whatever cuts the brightness in the room you're in. And step away from bright screens during that window too, whether that's your phone, a tablet, or a brightly lit television. You're not doing this to follow some strict rule. You're doing it because your retina is still processing whatever light hits it right up until the moment your eyes close. And giving it less to process means giving your brain less raw noise to turn into a swirling display later. Think of it less like a bedtime rule and more like turning down the volume knob before a room goes quiet, rather than slamming a door on a loud room and expecting instant silence. Once you've closed your eyes for the night, the colors and shapes that show up aren't a red flag. They're not proof that your mind is overactive or that something is wrong with your eyes. They're the completely expected output of a visual system that never fully powers down, one that keeps making small signals out of leftover light, blood flow, and its own internal noise, and interprets all of it exactly the way it interprets real images during the day. Try this for a week if you're curious. Notice what the show looks like on a night when you were staring at a bright phone screen right up until the second you got into bed, versus a night when you dimmed the lights and gave your eyes a slower transition. Pay attention to whether the colors feel calmer, quieter, less like fireworks, and more like a soft, drifting haze. You're not trying to make the phenomenon disappear. It won't. It's simply part of how your eyes and brain are built. You're just giving it a gentler stage to perform on. So the next time you close your eyes and see colors swirling in the dark, remember it's not your brain malfunctioning. It's your visual system quietly powering down for the night, running through its own small, strange display of leftover signals and neural noise, the same way it has every single night of your life. And dimming the lights beforehand doesn't turn the show off. It just gives it a gentler show to run, right as you're finally settling in for sleep.